What's going on YouTube? It's Teach back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my updated 2023 linebacker rankings as we get closer and closer to the 2023 NFL draft. Hope you all are excited and hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. And if you do, be sure to hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you're right here, want to see more draft content, more football coverage in general, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. And of course, leave me your linebacker rankings down below in the comment section. How would you stack this class up 5 up to 1? And then once we get to the honorable mentions, who's a name that I left off that you think I'm crazy for not including? Love to hear your thoughts and your opinions down below. But let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into it. We're going to go 5 up to 1, and we start with DeMarvion Overshown, a guy that I've liked pretty much this whole cycle. You know, I'm pretty sure in my way too early rankings, he was linebacker 5, and here he is once more. Safety converted to play linebacker, and, you know, you can cheat a little bit and say, oh, well, that guy's really good in coverage. He'll play sideline to sideline. But that truly is the case here with Overshown. He's a really good athlete, and he is rangy, no doubt about it. And he has good feel for zone coverage, too, and I think that comes back from a safety background. And then, you know, he comes to the combine, he weighs 230, so that's not great. So actually, let me just get this quick note out of the way. Every one of these guys is either or both shorter or weighs less than Anthony Richardson, except for one guy on this list. Only one guy is the same height and weight as Anthony Richardson. Everyone else smaller or lighter, however you want to phrase it. And that's crazy. Like, the days of linebacking play and linebacking build to 15 years ago is completely gone. So I just want to say that because a lot of these guys are basically somewhere between 6 foot and 6'2" and 225 to 235 pounds. Like, that's just what linebackers look like nowadays. So it gives me a little bit of hesitation about a lot of these guys in the run defense game, but nonetheless, it gives me a lot of excitement as them as parts of, you know, pass coverage. So anyways, we start with Overshown. He's kind of like the exact example of that. And honestly, as a tackler, really cleaned up that area. I think he had like a missed tackle percentage around 18% in 2021. And that was always a huge problem. But this year, only 5 missed tackles and like 4 came in one game. So he really did polish it up. Maybe he had 6 in the season, but you get the point. That number went way, 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 way down this year, which gives me the hope that this guy's figuring it out. He's taking steps in the right direction. So drafting in the 3rd round, maybe it'll take 2 years just because sometimes linebackers take a little bit of time. And, you know, this guy feels like he's still kind of gaining headway and learning the position. But man, after those 2 years, he could be a really scary player. So my last mock, I sent him to Houston. And I was like, man, if there's someone who's going to teach you how to play linebacker, it's D'Amico Ryans. Like, he's got to be towards the top of that list, right? So that definitely would make for an awesome landing spot. But I'm big on the upside and potential here out of Overshown. There's probably a relatively high floor here, or low floor rather, which may scare some people off. But I like the headway he's already made, learning how to play linebacker and cleaning up some of his issue areas. And I think he's just kind of beginning that path to becoming a real impact player. And I think by the back half of his rookie contract, he's going to become a really, really good starter for someone. And then it takes us into Drew Sanders. And that might surprise some people just because maybe if you only watch my mock drafts and now you're checking out a position ranking, you're like, man, Sanders is like the 1st or 2nd linebacker off the board for you a lot of times. Well, mock drafts you do with your ears and position rankings, big boards you do with your eyes. And I'm not really crazy about, I mean, I like Drew Sanders. I like all these guys for the most part, 1 through 5. But Sanders right now, his specialty is being a pass rusher. And if I were, you know, a GM or putting together a team, I don't know if that's the skill set that I'm like coveting. Like, if a guy only has one thing, I don't know if that's the skill set out of a linebacker I'm looking for. But that being said, you know, the Bill Belichick disciples like Brian Flores and Belichick himself, they like linebackers that can blitz like this. And hey, who knows? If he makes it to New England in the 2nd round, he could make an interesting Donta Hightower, you know, replacement. Who knows? Or, you know, Wink Martindale. Always been known to blitz as inside linebackers. The Pittsburgh Steelers have long coveted linebackers who could blitz. So he could be fits in all those defenses. It's just not something I think I would want. He is a good athlete, and, you know, I harken back to the Ole Miss game a lot, where you see this crazy leaping interception over the middle of the field. He also quickly locates a loose ball on the ground and is the first guy to it because, again, twitched up athlete. 5-star recruit would suggest as much. But again, you know, he goes to Alabama. That would also suggest that he's a really good athlete. And he's only used as a pass rusher. Maybe that's because, you know, Crimson Tide linebacking room, especially on the inside, is always loaded, right? So maybe that was the only place they can get him on the field early on. It was actually because of an injury. So it's good to see that he has that in his back pocket, but not a complete, you know, player by any stretch, right? Like, still needs a lot, has a lot of room to grow as a run defender and as someone in coverage. So good athlete and is a really interesting blitzer, but long way away from a lot of the other areas, which if I'm going to draft a linebacker, like, I am just biased towards, like, I want a guy who's going to help me stop the run, or I want this guy to be a coverage specialist. And Sanders just isn't one of those two things. That takes us to Diane Henley, who is a coverage specialist. So Played 6 years of college football, 5 at Nevada, then 1 year at Washington State. And I do think there's a, incremental step up in competition there, which makes me feel a little bit better about him then going from Washington State to the NFL level and being able to handle that jump. 6'2", right around 230 pounds. So smaller, lighter. And I do worry about him getting blocked out of plays. But that being said, he is a really fluid athlete and a really smooth mover in space. Makes him an awesome coverage weapon. And he's a really sure tackler too. And Washington State even used him a little bit in the blitz game. Not nearly as much as some other linebackers like an Ivan Pace from Cincinnati. But nevertheless, he did do it a little bit and he was relatively good at it when he got to do it. And where I am worried he'll get taken out of plays because of, offensive linemen getting to the second level. If they don't get their hands on him, it's not a problem. Like if this guy, reads the play, shoots the gap, he's such a sure tackler that I can count on that being a TFL. So a little bit of give and take. If if offensive linemen get their hands on him, it's not good. But he's also so quick that there's no guarantee that they do, and he might be able to shoot the gap and make a play. But really, you're drafting Diane Henley because of his coverage capabilities. And another knock against him is he's going to turn 24 in December. Some teams will like that because it's like, hey, we're drafting someone who's NFL ready. But then some teams are going to be like, that's too old, don't want it. So it could break either way. Then Jack Campbell comes in at 2. And you know what? Jack Campbell was already one of the guys I felt like I was higher on early on in this process. And a lot of people were, he's not a great athlete. And, after the combine, I think we saw he's not as bad an athlete as we originally thought. And he is the one guy that we're going to talk about in this video that is as big and weighs as much as Anthony Richardson, pretty much the same height and same weight, which it's crazy to say that there's only really one linebacker we're going to talk about where that's the case. But just throwing the tape and it's like, yeah, he looks like, a 6'5" linebacker of old and thumper, great run stopper, fills lanes, great tackler. And he's been pretty good in coverage. So, I was concerned. I was like, well, depending on his 40 time, is that because he's playing in Iowa, zone heavy defense too? That could be something that people like. His comfortability playing in that type of zone heavy scheme is definitely kind of it's a feather in the cap in my books. But then he goes and runs a 40, which is 67th percentile at 4.65. So I'm like, oh, wait a minute, you have my attention. You're not this big, slow, sluggish white guy that we all kind of thought. And then here's the kicker for me: 6'7", 4.3 cone. It's 95th percentile. And to me, once we got that number and once I got to see the percentile that it fell into, I was like, yep, that makes all the sense in the world. That's why he's so good at reading, reacting, not losing, and getting put out of position on a play. It's because he's so quick laterally, and his agility is really just a special trait. 95th percentile, that's insane. So because of that, he's able to find the ball carrier, shoot gaps, make a play. He's not going to get lost with motion and traffic in the backfield, or if he does, maybe start in the wrong direction, he's got the makeup agility to be able to get back into position and make a play. So yeah, I like him a lot. And also, like, solid enough 40 paired with a gaudy 3-cone. I'm not feeling too bad about him as a coverage player, especially if he is in a zone-heavy scheme where it's really just reacting to underneath throws, your drags, running back as an outlet, tight ends, a little hitch route, stuff like that. I'm not really concerned about that. Man coverage, if he does end up in, like, let's just say a Wink Martindale defense where he'll be asked to blitz and he'll be asked to play man coverage, I'm a little more iffy about that, but also 95th percentile 3-cone. I'm thinking about him taking on a Texas route, and because of that lateral and change of motion, change of direction skills, he might be able to hold his own. But hopefully he goes to a zone-heavy defense because obviously he's familiar with it, playing a ton of zone at Iowa. I think he'd be really, really comfortable, and he'd be a really big-time impact player. And hey, he's got the size, he's got the tape, and now we know he's a not bad athlete by any stretch. And in regards to his 3-cone, he's a special athlete, which is not something I would have anticipated saying about Jack Campbell like 3 or 4 months ago, which is why he comes in at number 2. But then Trenton Simpson is still my off-ball linebacker number 1. Safety skill set and a linebacker's body. I even think you can move him to the nickel and do some creative stuff there. He's been playing that star backer role in Clemson that has kind of become the face of that defense. You go back to Isaiah Simmons and some other players of past that have been in that type of positioning and in that role under Brent Venables and even still now at Clemson. So yeah, big time fan of Simpson. I think he's a big time impact player in coverage, but also sound player in the run. And he's a good tackler as well. And also multi-year starter, tons of production, tons of starting experience. So yeah, big fan of Trenton Simpson. And honestly, I could talk more, but you've heard it all. Trenton Simpson has been a lot of people's off-ball linebacker 1 throughout this process. Now it's starting to change a little bit, but I still think he's the best of the bunch. And like I said, I think you're getting a guy who is NFL ready, can be a starter right away the second he steps into the facility. And he's not a liability in coverage, and he's not a liability as a run defender, which there's not a whole lot of guys here. Like Henley, I think, could be liability in the run game because if he gets blocked, he's toast. Drew Sanders right now is a big-time work in progress as a run defender and in coverage. Marvin Overshown, a little bit of both. So Campbell and Simpson both feel like the guys that make the biggest impact right away, and I don't have to worry about them being a limitation or a liability in run defense or in coverage. They both feel like they can do that. I just think Simpson, I think I like him just a smidge more than Jack Campbell. And it's not really fair, the reason why, but he runs, you know, a 40 time at 4.43. That's insane. And he does it at 6'2¼ and 235 pounds. So he's not as light as, you know, a Henley or some of the other linebackers we're going to talk about in the next screen. Doesn't have the weight and the size of Campbell, but he also does have a little bit more long speed. But yeah, I really don't think you can go wrong with either one of those top two guys in this year's class. And I still like Henley as well. Let's get on to the honorable mentions now. So Dorian Williams, I mean, this is like textbook what I'm talking about with these small linebackers, like 6 foot 220. If that, he might be like 217. But dude, electric in coverage, and a huge part of why Tulane was a lot better this year than I think people would have expected coming into the season. Hey, they won a bowl game, right? Like, I mean, this was a team better than a lot of people would have expected. And Dorian Williams was just awesome throughout the middle of the field, true sideline to sideline speed, an electric athlete, really. In a class that there's good athletes for sure. Dorian Williams and Owen Pappoe, the guy I'm going to talk about next, are like twitched up to the gills. Like, I mean, there's not a whole lot of linebackers like that this year, but these guys are unbelievable, built in a lab for their position. Williams will get blocked out of plays, no doubt about it, and he's not as sure a tackler as some of the other guys that I've already mentioned, but draft him as a project coverage specialist, give it a year or two, and this guy can make you very, very happy with that selection. And I think you could probably get him third, fourth round or something like that. Same thing with Owen Pappoe. He runs a 4.3940, top time for any linebacker. And you just hear how Auburn talks about him, and they're praising him like no other. And he is also coming off the best year of his career at Auburn, which is definitely good. And he's been a guy who battled some injuries, so it was nice to see him have, you know, a strong finish to his career at Auburn, which that was a program that was kind of, you know, dealing with a lot of non-football related issues, specifically with their head coach, and that kind of put a, you know, a black mark on that program. So I feel like that kind of altered and limits how good a lot of the Auburn players looked this past year. But anyways, Pappoe did take that step forward a little bit this past year, and at 4.39 40 time, this guy is saying, hey, I could be a coverage specialist. I can go sideline to sideline, cover a lot of field. And again, smaller side, right around 6 foot, 6'1", 220-ish, 225 pounds. But feels like he plays bigger than that. Now, that might just be, you know, me. But he also feels like, well, I was a little surprised when I saw his weight, because he feels like maybe it's just because he flies around and because he's so fast that he lays the boom because of just like the velocity in which he moves, the acceleration that he has once he starts moving. That's totally plausible, but man, he can hit. So I like Pappoe. And again, third, fourth round, I think he's an interesting project. Then Henry To'oTo'o, multi-year starter at Tennessee, then Alabama. Small, not an insane athlete, just plays the position well, which is crazy because he has so many things working against him that it doesn't really make sense that he's this good. But hey, Nick Saban trusted him to come over from Tennessee and pay dividends, made him a starter right away. I do think he's a guy where if you're really in a pinch, could wear the green dot right away. I don't know who's drafting Henry To'oTo'o to be a starting linebacker, but there could certainly be a case where teams looking at him in the third round saying, hey, we just know what we're getting with Henry To'oTo'o. They draft him, and he can become a starter, and he's smart, he's cerebral, and plays the run really well. I think that's kind of the number one thing that immediately comes to mind with Henry To'oTo'o. But yeah, it just leaves a lot to be desired in his frame and his athletic traits. Then Ivan Pace Jr. Yeah, I mean, he looked really, really good at the Senior Bowl, but most of his highlights were just as a blitzer. So this is the same thing as Drew Sanders, but I think Sanders has like a little bit more upside and a little bit more twitchy athleticism to him. Ivan Pace to me is solely a blitzing specialist, but put him in Pittsburgh, give him to Wink Martindale, put him in New England. He could totally be one of those guys that is perfect for what they're looking for as at least one of those inside linebackers being a blitzing specialist. And dude, he's electric, like a 93 plus pass rush grade from PFF. So yeah, no, some insane pass rush production. And that was by far what he did best at Cincinnati. So, and solid enough athlete too. You know, you see the explosiveness, you see that burst when he takes his first step. So yeah, really interesting player. Don't think you're going to get much more than blitzing specialist, but nonetheless, for the right scheme, that brings a lot of value. And then Aubrey Miller Jr. So unfortunately, you're seeing this after Jackson State's pro day. And that was part of the reason why I left him, because if you're still watching this video, then you're a real one. So comment that one down below. You're a real one. But their pro day is Monday. And he is going to be, if he is a above average athlete, he becomes a really interesting day 3 pick. Also, the reason he's on here is I was like, man, who's the 10th best linebacker in this year's class? I'm not sure. It's a steep drop off. Same thing with the IDO class that we just did in 2 days ago. But I'm hoping there's potential that he's like a solid athlete. 6'2", 235-ish pounds, so not terrible size. 4-star recruit, goes to Missouri, then transfers to Jackson State, which smaller school, but they are at least like perennial contenders as that smaller school coming from a smaller conference and a smaller division of college football. So we're South Dakota State guys, we're giving them a pass. I feel like Jackson State, we should give them the same pass. So we'll have to wait and see how his pro day numbers come in, but he was a stud the 3 years he was at Jackson State. Now, was that level of competition as a 4-star recruit and someone who was originally recruited to go to Missouri? Maybe. But, and the level of competition is not great. Like, anytime I see Campbell on someone's schedule and it's not like week 1, it's like, that's not great. And hey, I went to a Big South school, so, I'd go fighting Campbell's, right? But anyways, getting back on track. I think there's an interesting element, and he could at least be a dynamic special teams player. It just comes down to what his athletic ability is. But maybe he starts out as a special teamer, and by the end of his rookie contract, starts to get some snaps and becomes, a pseudo-reliable inside linebacker. Like Aubrey Miller Jr. is someone no one's talking about right now, but awesome production as a player. Smaller school, yes. Not bad size. And if he puts up solid athletic numbers and, didn't get the combine invite, which is a travesty, but if he showcases good athleticism, look out. This might be a name we start to see a whole lot more of. But that is going to do it for my updated inside linebacker, off-ball linebacker position rankings. Let me know what you thought down below in the comment section. How would you rank this class 5 up to 1? And also, who should I have included here in the honorable mentions? Who should have been linebacker 5 instead of Aubrey Miller Jr.? Love to hear your thoughts down below. But hopefully you all enjoyed. Be sure to hit that like button if you did. And subscribe if you're new, looking for more football content in your life. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.